Hello, my dear friends. Today we are here with the next part of the life story of our master Sri Ramakrishna Paramhansa Dev. Till now, we have read a few parts from the chapter Back to Dakshineshwar. So, let's start and let's come to know what happened next to our master's life, what happened to his sadhana, and what happened new in his life. Let's start. The ordinary man would not have borne a fraction of that tremendous fervor. His body would have shattered by a quarter of that emotion. I could forget my indescribable pangs only by seeing the mother in some form or other for the greater part of the day and night. Otherwise, this body could not have survived. For 6 years, these eyes remained wide open. Not a wink of sleep visited them. I could not close the eyelids. However much I might try to do so, I had no idea of time, nor of the body. When the mind at rare intervals came down to a lower plane, and I had a faint idea of the body, a shudder of pain would pass through me at the thought that I was going mad. Standing before a mirror, I would put my finger into my eyes to see if the eyelids would close. But they would not. Horrified, I would often burst into tears and pray, Mother, is this the result of praying and wholly surrendering myself unto thee? Ah, thou hast visited me with a fatal disease. But the next moment I would say, Let it be as thou wishest. Let this body go to pieces, but leave me not. Reveal thyself to me. Be kind to thy helpless son. O mother, I have taken shelter at thy lotus feet. Thou art my only refuge. As I prayed thus, my mind would again be stimulated. This body would seem a trifle not worth thinking about, and the blissful mother would appear before me and console me with her gracious words. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that when in the course of spiritual practice the aspirant's mind becomes sufficiently purified, it acts as the Guru. In the light of this statement, we can understand to a certain extent the meaning of his extraordinary vision about the double coming out of his body. It betokened a high degree of concentration where the contents of the mind took a concrete form and lived and moved like a embodied being. One of his sadhanas of this interesting period consisted in banishing from his mind all attachment to wealth. Sitting on the bank of the Ganges, he took some earth in one hand and a few rupees in the other, weighing their value mentally as he passed them from hand to hand. Money, he said to himself, can at best give only a comfortable living and some facilities for charity. That is all. It cannot give realization of God, which is the only thing worth having in life. Hence, it has no more real value than this handful of earth. Firmly impressing this idea on his mind, he finally consigned both to the Ganges. Again, for the complete effacement of a sense of superiority from his mind, he washed unclean places like an ordinary sweeper, viewing alike all objects of the world as but modifications of matter. Following out this idea, he taught his mind to regard sandal paste and filth as the same, and he would touch them both with equal indifference. Mathur's regard for Sri Ramakrishna was deepening day by day. He was ever careful about his comforts, as the following incident will show. One day, Sri Ramakrishna entered one of the Shiva temples at Dakshineshwar and began to recite the Mahima Stotra, a beautiful hymn in praise of Lord Shiva. Soon he was overpowered with emotion at the thought of his great glory and forgot the world. coming to a particularly beautiful stanza in which the glories of the Lord are declared as altogether indescribable. His feeling rose to a climax, and he was brought face to face, as it were, with the great God. He no longer remembered the order of the lines or the stanzas composing the hymn, and even forgot its language. O Lord, how can I describe thy infinite glory? Were the only words that came from his lips. Tears began to flow profusely from his eyes. His strange conduct caused people to gather around him, though he was not conscious of them. Mathur, who happened to be present at Dakshineshwar, hurried to the spot. He stood by, mutely watching the spectacle. An officious employee suggested that this mad man be removed from the proximity of the deity, whereupon Mathur said that anyone touching Sri Ramakrishna would do so at his peril. This silenced the men present. After a long time, Sri Ramakrishna gradually recovered normal consciousness. He was astonished to see so many people looking at him. Seeing Mathur, he asked him in a childlike way if he had done anything wrong in a state of unconsciousness. Oh no, replied Mathur. You were only reciting a hymn, and I stood here to see that nobody disturbed you. Some time after this, a remarkable incident happened which greatly increased Mathur's regard for Sri Ramakrishna. One day, in the long veranda on the east side of his room, the latter was pacing to and fro. Absorbed in deep thought, Mathur was seated alone in his room, whence he could have a good view of the master. For a long time he watched, the latter not being at all conscious that he was being observed. Suddenly, an unexpected thing happened. Mathur ran to him, prostrated himself, and began to weep like a child at his feet. Sri Ramakrishna was taken aback and said, what is this? You are the son in law of Rani Rashmani. What will people think if they see you behave like this? Be calm and get up. But Mathur still wept. When he regained his composure a little, he explained the reason for these emotions. I watched you as you were pacing in the veranda. When you went one way, I saw you in the form of the blissful mother. When you turned in the opposite direction, you took on the form of the Lord Shiva. At first, I thought it was hallucination. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. But to my astonishment, every time I saw the same phenomenon. As he spoke, Mathur wept. So overwhelmed was he with emotion. But I know nothing of it, retreated the master in his characteristic way. Referring to this incident, he said later on, Mathur would not be comforted at the time. I felt nervous lest Rani Rashmani should learn of it and think I had hypnotized him. Then he would add, was it for nothing that Mathur respected and looked so much after the comforts of this body? Meaning himself, Ramakrishna Dev, Paramhansa Dev. Mother showed him many wonderful things time and again. It was written in his horoscope that his Ishta, chosen deity, would be always gracious upon him, nay, would move in flesh and blood with him. After this, Mathur's regard and devotion increased a thousandfold. Henceforth, he counted it as a rare privilege to be of the least service to the master, and always complied with his wishes. And we shall see later on how he was intimately associated with a great part of the master's subsequent sadhanas. We now come to a noteworthy event in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. It was the death of Rani Rashmani, which took place on the 19th of February 1861. Before passing away, she had the satisfaction of seeing two of her great desires fulfilled, namely the consecration of the temple at Dakshineshwar and a permanent arrangement for its future efficient management. The part she had to play in the divine drama of which Sri Ramakrishna was the hero was done, and the time was come for her exit. She fell ill with fever and stomach trouble, which developed into a chronic dysentery of a serious type. It is said that her last days were embittered by the refusal of her eldest daughter Padmamani Dasi to sign the document waiving her claims to the property of the Kali temple. A few days before her death, Rani Rashmani was taken to her house at Kalighat on the bank of the sacred Adi Ganga. Shortly before her death, she was brought to the Ganges. Seeing some lamps lighted before her, she exclaimed, "Remove those lights! How tame they look now! Ah, my mother is coming! The halo of her from has illuminated the whole place." After a slight pause, she said, "Mother, art thou come?" "Well, Padma refused to sign. Will that do any harm, mother?" Uttering these words, she passed away quietly, and her soul, leaving behind the fret and fever of this world, soared high into divine realms. On the death of Rani Rashmani, Mathur became the sole executor of the estate. He sought to place himself unreservedly at the disposal of the master, and since his great vision, it was his one desire to live always near him. Not only would he arrange, arrange the trips which Sri Ramakrishna desired to make, but would often, as in the case of his visit to the Panihati fair, go himself in disguise with a few attendants to look after him. On the eve of his embarking on a varied course of sadhana, Sri Ramakrishna felt the necessity of support from someone who could supply him with the requisites for those practices. He even prayed to the mother for such a one. Later on, Master spoke of Mathur as the first of the five supporters engaged for him by the Divine Mother. Whenever any desire arose in his mind, he would speak of it to Mathur, who was only too glad to fulfill it at once. At the same time, Sri Ramakrishna was very kind to Mathur, yet on questions of vital importance, where some principle was at stake, he never yielded to the latter or hesitated to say what he deemed to be the right thing. His treatment of Mathur was characterized by a spirit of independence as well as of simplicity. It never occurred to him to try to curry favor, for he knew that the omniscient mother would in time fulfill his desires. One day, some ornaments were stolen from the images of the deities in the Radha Kanta temple. Mathur heard of it, and in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna, ap- apostrophized, apostrophized the gods. "Ah, you were powerless to protect your own ornaments from the thief." This at once elicited a rebuke from the master, who said, "What nonsense you speak! God cares very little for these clods of earth which you call jewels. They are precious to you, not to him. For is not Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, his servant maid?" Mathur one day proposed to Sri Ramakrishna that he would sit he would set apart a large estate in his name. At this, Sri Ramakrishna thundered, "What? Do you intend to make me a worldly man?" Mathur often invited him to his residence at John Bazar and spent many delightful days with him there. In the evening, he would take him out for a drive. He brought costly utensils of gold and silver for the use of the master and many costly robes. But Sri Ramakrishna remained the same child of the Divine Mother, perfectly unattached. One day, a very expensive shawl was purchased for him. He took it cheerfully and, like a boy, showed it to others. But his discriminating mind soon began to argue. What is there in it? Nothing but goat's wool. Like every other thing, it is also a modification of matter. It protects co- one form, cold, no doubt, but this it protects one from cold, no doubt. But this can be done as well by a blanket or quilt, and like other material things, it does not help one to realize God. Rather, it makes its owner assume an air of superiority. He thinks himself rich and is proud. So, it takes a man away from God. As he was thus weighing thus in his mind the evils which the shawl was likely to produce, he threw the beautiful shawl on the ground and began to trample and spit on it. Not content with this, he was about to burn it when someone rescued it. On hearing of the incident, Mathur said with a smile that it was well done. Mathur had a family priest in the Kalighat temple named Chandra Haldar. For some days he had been noticing Mathur's devotion to Sri Ramakrishna. Wishing to monopolize the rich man's favor, he was alarmed to find a competitor in the field. He determined to put a stop to it. One day, Sri Ramakrishna lay in an outer room of Mathur's Zon Bazar house in a half conscious state when the priest suddenly came in. There was no one nearby. The man pushed the master several times and said, "Well, tell me, how you hypnotized Mathur Babu?" Sri Ramakrishna kept silent, for he had not the power to speak then. The priest, getting no answer to his repeated queries, was exasperated and kicked the master thrice before he went away. Sri Ramakrishna knew what the consequences would be if the matter were reported to Mathur. He kept it all to so he kept it to himself. Thus, Mathur was impressed with Sri Ramakrishna's invulnerable purity and simplicity in all circumstances and found him to be absolutely proof against lust and wealth. So, my dear friends, today I am stopping here. In the next week, we are going to read the next part of the life journey of Sri Ramakrishna Paramhansa Dev. So, till then, I must say, be happy, be healthy, and keep praying, whatever the way you like to pray, but keep praying with honesty, and pray to the divinity that our souls, which is always connected to this supreme power, that realization must come to us. So, with this good wish, I am I am bidding you goodbye. We will meet again tomorrow. Not tomorrow. We will meet again with the English segment again from Folktales of Bengal, which we usually read in 3 segments from Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. With that, tada!